Nestled deep within the woodlands of west-central Serbia in a village known as Zaroje, an old rundown watermill lies in ruin with a terrifying history. In the early 18th century, it was occupied by an elderly recluse who worked as a flour miller by the name of Sava Savanović. Sava was deemed as a very strange individual and was even slightly feared by many of the locals. He was rarely seen during daylight hours and typically only by those who paid him a visit while purchasing flour. This continued for many years until one day when a particular customer came to make a purchase, he found a very much unalive Sava lying on the floor with red stains around his collar. Upon checking the body, a yellow butterfly then departed from his mouth and made its way out the door. From that point forward, anyone who attempted to take over the miller position passed away shortly after occupying the space. And on each occasion, each person had apparently been discovered with a mysterious pair of wounds on their neck. Many years later, a young man named Strinja took over the mill, who was madly in love with the daughter of a local merchant and wished to prove his worth by earning a decent living to provide for her. In spite of warnings by the locals about the mill being haunted, Strinja was very determined and surprisingly began to make a decent profit for himself. Villagers then began to make more and more frequent visits to purchase flour, which within a few short weeks resulted in his business flourishing. However, in spite of this seemingly promising situation, something odd appeared to be transpiring behind the scenes. Once nightfall had arrived, Strinja had taken to locking himself in a windowless loft with a firearm due to hearing strange rattling noises. On one particular occasion, the rattling appeared to grow much louder than ever before. It apparently grew so aggressive that it began to shake the walls and the planks below him. Before long, the door began to rattle, causing the lock to eventually break loose and fall to the ground. When the door flew open, a tall, gaunt, lifeless elderly man stood glaring in the doorway. And it was indeed none other than Sava Savanović. Strinja then let out a piercing scream before firing a round right into his chest. Sava then shrieked and fled from the mill shortly before a group of villagers arrived to Strinja's aid. Together they marched to the cemetery where they then sought out the resting place of the elderly vampire. One thing that they apparently had noticed was that the ground about the tombstone had been disturbed and was now wet. After unearthing the coffin, Strinja then looked upon the face of the man whom he had just seen standing in the mill earlier that night. He still possessed a fresh wound from being fired at as he glared dormantly into the eyes of those above him. As Strinja began to nail a huge metal spike through his chest, Sava let out a passing groan, upon which a yellow butterfly departed once again from his mouth. Strinja then ran to the home of the woman that he loved to inform her of the good news, but once he arrives, he notices that the window is already open. As he climbed inside, he noticed that the yellow butterfly had made its way into her home and was now perched on top of her head as she slept. Before Strinja could reach her, the butterfly made its way downward and eventually disappeared inside of her mouth. The girl then awoke with a pair of sharp fangs and a savage thirst, upon which she attacks and turns Strinja into a vampire, thus finally uniting them together. This tale arose during a period when vampire legends were becoming more widespread and popular, as well as the character developing into more of a collective persona. As a matter of fact, the word vampire was never written or used in any English accounts prior to the year 1732. Before the 18th century, the word vampire was not commonly used to describe these undead beings, and up until a certain point was not even an existing word. Vampire is basically an evolved derivative of the Slavic term upir, which through cultural influences eventually became the Serbian term vampir. The one unifying factor in these legends, however, no matter the cultural setting or time period, is that these were all once people who did not fall under the constraints of society's morals. This is why the two most common ways associated with becoming a vampire are excommunication or engaging in some form of unorthodox practice. Those who lived as recluses, maybe didn't socialize that much, or maybe they possibly practiced a different faith from the remaining consensus. Ultimately, these legends stem from the Christian fear and belief that if we pass without God in our hearts, then we will inevitably rise once again as a puppet of the devil. Thank you all so much for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to see more in the future, make sure to show your support by giving that like button a smash. Also, make sure to subscribe to my channel to receive any notifications on future content that I might upload. Thank you all so much once again, and until next time, take care, guys.